Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. And welcome to today's webinar. I'm Ashley from Arena International, and I'll be hosting this webinar. It is our pleasure to have Hawk Search by Bridgeline with us today, who will be presenting this webinar titled Top 5 Ways to Engineer Engagement with Your Catalog. Now, I'll provide some housekeeping information before we start. First of all, please send your questions throughout the webinar. We'll allocate some time at the end of the session to address any questions or thoughts that you may have. If your question doesn't get answered today, it will be available to be answered at a later stage. For any related content on the webinar, please click on the widget shown on your screen. If you have any tech issues, please click on the help icon. And now, please allow me to welcome our speaker. I will let you introduce yourself to the audience.
Hello, everyone. Ashley, thank you for the wonderful introduction there, and happy to be back here presenting again. My name is Jonathan Meyer. I am one of the senior solutions engineers for the Bridgeline team. I've been primarily working with the Hawk Search tool for over 8.5 years now at this point, so lots of experience in the search space, the on-site search space, and kind of seen where that has grown over the years, and looking forward to sharing some of that knowledge today and helping you guys kind of understand some of the different ways you can get more engagement out of your catalog, because that is going to be one of the main stumbling blocks that we see in kind of commerce spaces and just anyone really who's using site search. So let's go ahead and get kind of started here with the main topic of one of the things that we want to kind of cover here, and what we hope to give you information around is what if you take away anything from this, we want you to learn how you're able to cut through complex catalogs and convert searches into sales. So the problem that we see with a lot of kind of site search experiences, they're just kind of stumbling through the process. They're not fully featured. They're not fully developed. Thought hasn't been put into them. And there's lots of different kinds of ways that you can kind of look at that experience and kind of personas, basically, that we want to think about there. So let's go ahead and give you kind of the full breakdown here. What are you going to be able to take away from this session after you've sat here and listened to me talk for a few minutes here? The highlight is we want to be able to break down your site into the key elements that drive conversion. So we want to be able to understand what is actually driving conversion on your site. We want you to be able to understand how you can direct traffic to the exactly right product for purchase. So there's a lot of different kinds of ways to accomplish that. What are the different tools that are available? How can what are the things to be paying attention to in that regard? And to identify new opportunities. So it's not just about kind of converting those who are currently on the site, but also being able to bring back in additional visitors and users to the site, be able to add on additional items to that shopping cart, increase that average order value. So that kind of gives you a rundown on what you should expect out of the conversation here, let you know that you're getting the right information. Well, let's go ahead and get into the actual weeds now. So we want to start with kind of the thing that everyone always thinks about when you think of search. Your mind kind of immediately will go to like Google or so on, the other search engines, where you go to that and you're putting your search keywords, you're getting back in those search results, and of course everyone is always focused on SEO for those kinds of discussions. It is a big part of the conversation, is how can we get visitors to our site? And obviously that is very important. We're not here to diminish that. It is an important part of getting visitors to your site, getting people to discover your site, discover what you carry, be able to find exactly what they're looking for. You definitely want to make sure that you're focusing on that. But what we have seen is kind of part of this cog system that you're seeing here. We've got traffic at the top, which turns conversions, which turns AOV, is that once someone gets to the site, once they actually arrive on the site, it can be very difficult to actually find what you're looking for. If they haven't typed in that specific exact product or part number and gotten directly to a product detail page, say they land on a category page, they land on your home page, what do they then do? How are they then able to leverage the fact that you've arrived, you've got them onto your site now, and how can you then convert that into an actual paying customer? And so we want to make sure that, something to keep in mind, you can put a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus on the SEO end of things, of getting visitors to find your site and find the things through Google and so on. But once they arrive there, you need to be paying attention to what actually happens. Are they converting off of that? As we're saying here, the what they do when they arrive can thwart even the best campaign efforts. So you really want to make sure that you're paying attention to not just that SEO effort, but what are they doing then when we're talking about on site? And that, of course, leads us to our next topic here, which is the on-site search bar. It's really kind of the secret weapon in this discussion here, because if someone does arrive at the site, even say they do arrive on a unique product detail page, is that the right product they're looking for? Are they looking for alternatives? Then is that product in stock or out of stock? If it's out of stock, they might then go to that search bar on your site and look for an alternative. You can leverage opportunities to do drop-in like recommendations to present alternatives. And we're going to be covering kind of all of these different use cases that can extend out from that search bar functionality. And then that will continue to turn the other cogs that we're looking at here. Of this is then going to drive conversion. This is then, of course, going to help increase average order value. Now, there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of break down this functionality. And so what we've kind of looked at is there's really kind of 4 major user intents or segmentations of kind of visitors, personas you heard me refer to earlier when thinking about how someone's getting to the site and what are they looking for. And we're going to break those down. We're going to go into in more detailed, take a detailed dive on each one of these kind of topics here. But we're going to start with informational, and then we're going to move into searching, navigational, and then transactional. And these kind of follow like a little evolutionary path. Informational is kind of at a high level. They're looking for information around products. Searching, they know specifically what they're looking for. Navigational, they might not know exactly what they're looking for, but they have a general idea. And transactional is kind of the end goal. That's where you want to get all of your segmented users into that kind of experience if they're actually purchasing things. But there are things that you can then do on that point, even in a transactional end of a kind of persona, to help improve average order value and help improve conversion. So let's break this down here. What does that actually mean? Well, we're going to start with informational. And this is, another term that you might have heard used to describe this kind of visitor is a spear hunter, a spear fisher. They are looking specifically for what they're looking for. They're researching information. They're not necessarily ready to purchase anything. They are gathering information. They are reading reviews. They are reading product descriptions. They're looking at variations of it. They're checking out, pricing. They're kind of gathering all of this information. And so they're not a visitor who you want to really lean into kind of a lot of sales information, you don't want to do that. You don't want to make sure you're presenting everything that you can to them. And they have a very different kind of mindset than I think what a lot of visitors think of. Oh, someone came to my site. They're strictly looking to purchase. That's where we're trying to get them to that transactional stage. But there's a lot of other stages that you can help kind of guide a visitor through as we're moving through this process, leading them towards that transactional process. So when we're thinking about an informational visitor, what are those common habits? And again, as I was mentioning a little bit just a second ago, they're going to be reading reviews. If you're thinking about an informational visitor, they're going to be gathering information around the products they're looking to purchase. And so reviews is a really common way to help a visitor make an informed decision. And so if you're not currently leveraging reviews, that's definitely something that you're going to want to think about adding to your site or leveraging or adding the ability to do so. Comparing products. So this is another really key functionality that I think gets kind of left behind, is this ability to say, if I'm researching products, if I am the informational visitor, one of the things that I can do here is, look at product A, look at product B, let me put them side by side and compare the statistics between them. Is there, different kind of weight on that product? Is it made of a different material? What's the voltage of it? If we're thinking in a B2B environment, that can be extremely useful when comparing kind of complex products. When looking at more of a B2C experience, it can be, what are those reviews? Let me see those two products side by side. Let me see the warranty information of those products. Let me see, the capacity of that washer or that dryer, and be able to understand kind of what that actually is available when looking at those two products. So being able to do those kind of comparisons is an important part of that. One of the things that we're seeing kind of gaining more traction, I should say, is that being able to upload user photos, see things in kind of a real world environment. This helps a visitor understand what will this product actually look like in the actual experience. So moving on to kind of the opportunities then. So what does this give you as the ability to do as a provider of services here? So one of the things that we want to make sure that we're tackling here is that with this opportunity, this gives you the ability to be transparent with your visitors, to increase kind of consumer trust. One of the ways that this allows you to kind of differentiate yourself from your visitors, your other competitors, I should say. that this gives you the ability to say, okay, here is the actual product that we're giving you a lot of additional information. If everyone's selling the same product, obviously there can be, you know, differences in terms of price, differences in terms of availability. But one of the ways that you can build brand loyalty is by providing a lot of other resources to say, well, oh, I know I can go to this site, your site, and I can find not only the products I'm looking for, but the information around it. I can find those user reviews. I can find the specification sheets and the user guides and frequently asked questions and kind of all of the other related information around that. And so you want to make this kind of as easy as possible for visitors to find all of that information, because it can help build you as not only a point of purchase, but as a resource, a trusted resource for information that, you know, everyone kind of always starts at that point before they're going into the other segments that we're going to talk about. So what tools assist this visitor? So we've talked about kind of what the informational visitor is looking for. What can you help them with? And so this is going to be a couple of different things that we're tackling here. We've got obviously kind of spell correction. So if they're putting in different search terms, you want to make sure that you are presenting in the right information. You don't have that as kind of a roadblock there. Being able to suggest alternatives to them as they're interacting with that search box. So here are top product matches, here are top suggestions for other searches, and also being able to leverage things like recommendations that are going to communicate what other visitors are looking at, alternatives, and so on. So let's go ahead and get into some, you know, real world examples of that. And this is able to really drive some of the conversation that we have around from an informational visitor, where they are thinking of, you know, I'm not necessarily looking to purchase. So you want to make sure that you're getting the right information in front of the visitor. And one of those things that you can see here in this example, where we are presenting a jar that someone's looking to purchase. Well, what are the things that are going to be important about that? Obviously, there's the rest of the product detail information here. This is an important piece of that as well, to make sure that you have the relevant product information available for the visitor. But then you want to be able to leverage other aspects of that. We kind of refer to this as, you know, wisdom of the content. So we know a lot about this kind of product from a recommendations and search perspective. And so we can use all of that information to help the informational visitor make informed decisions here. So in this use case here, we're leveraging the accessories that we're seeing, which are exact matches for what the jar is that we're currently looking at. So the jar, obviously, as you can see there in the screenshot, the cap is not included. So we want to make sure that we're making suggestions for caps that would go along with that. That informational visitor looking for information around this product, let's show them the related items that are going to go along with that. And those caps obviously match the exact size. You can see there in the product description, the cap size is listed as 70-G450 as the size, and those are the exact same size caps that are being suggested as part of the accessory. So leveraging that kind of wisdom of the crowd, using some of that AI functionality to help inform that and to help make suggestions for that informational visitor, so they're able to see kind of all of the relevant pieces of information on that product detail page. Another good point to kind of reference here is that this can be leveraged in a couple of different ways. So you can, you know, really kind of get as much information in front of the visitor as possible. Again, if we're thinking about that informational visitor, they are not ready to purchase yet. So you want to make sure that you're presenting kind of as much information and in an organized fashion. This isn't just kind of throw everything out of them as possible. You want to make sure this is kind of structured. And so you can see here, while we have that initial display there for the recommended accessories, we're then hitting them again once we get a little bit further down into the product detail page with other accessories that, again, continuing to match the kind of wisdom of the content that we talked about earlier, but also suggesting similar or alternatives. An informational visitor is going to be very interested in the other kinds of products that are available. So making suggestions for alternatives in terms of maybe different sizes. In this case, we're looking at a 16-ounce glass jar. Well, let's make suggestions for 64-ounce glass jars. Maybe they're looking for a larger one. Making suggestions for different styles, different materials, different capacities. This isn't a way for you to really easily kind of guide a visitor, not only towards, you know, what is the initial product they've landed on. Maybe that's not exactly what they're looking for. Let's make those alternative suggestions and not lose that visitor. Let's not have them bounce off the site by making these alternative suggestions. And for an informational visitor, this also helps give them kind of a bigger picture of the entire catalog that you do carry. Go ahead and move into the next segment of the kind of visitors that we want to talk about. And obviously, this is kind of the bread and butter when you think about where I've gotten my start in is searching here. And this is obviously one of the things that we can talk at great length about here. So searching, you know, this visitor knows exactly what they're looking for. The content, product download links that this user for are specific. This is, you know, they know exactly what they're looking for. They've done their research. This is a very common kind of evolution of that informational visitor. They've gathered all that information, so now they know exactly what they're looking for. They're not interested in casual browsing. They're really looking to get kind of directly towards what they're looking for. And the quicker you can make that happen, the better. And so you want to make sure that it will drive kind of good experiences around that. So the common habits of a searcher, it says it right there in the name. They are going to go directly to that search box. They're going to go ahead and punch in those, product descriptions, those long tail, I'm looking for a women's, green large shirt, and they want to make sure that all matches there. They're looking for a 64-ounce glass jar. They're going to include all of those kind of variables in that search bar, or they're going to put in part numbers or SKU numbers, and they want to make sure that that is also matching against that. And so obviously the opportunities for you is you want to streamline this. You want to make that process kind of as easy as possible to say when they put in those long tail keyword searches, when they put in those part number searches, that you want to get them right to where they're looking for, to streamline that that checkout process. Because obviously at the end of the day, we want to get them to the actual checkout, transactional segmentation that we're going to talk about in a little bit later. So again, they are very specific. We're trying to really kind of get them directly towards what they're looking for. This doesn't mean that this is not an opportunity for you to do kind of, add-ons for that, or do customer loyalty, things like that. This is an opportunity where you can kind of help complete that purchase, because again, even if this visitor does know exactly what they're looking for, there might be things that go along with that. And so let's talk about some of the kind of examples of what tools might assist that. As we talked about, obviously there is kind of the example of putting in a part number search and having that match. Now, having a good kind of autocomplete with your search tool, sometimes it's referred to as a type ahead or suggest ahead. It's really when you start to type in that search box and things start to appear there. That is what we refer to in the HawkSearch world as an autocomplete. In this example here, you can see that we're typing in a part number. We're getting suggestions right away for other popular part numbers that have been searched on, and also seeing directly those product matches for that. In addition, you want to make sure that your search results stay relevant to that, where you can see in the top right example that we're typing in 2-foot metal stool, and we're seeing examples of results that are matching against that, even though the product descriptions might say 24 inches. Again, we're here in the United States, so I know we have possibly a worldwide audience. We'll have that whole imperial versus metric discussion at another time, I guess. But you can see here in this example that when we're doing that search, we're pulling back in the relevant results for that, regardless of that kind of discrepancy in that unit of measurement. And also just in general, providing things like top product matches and popular searches that can help a visitor get directly towards what they're looking for. Partial matching in this example here. You'll see in the bottom right screenshot that the visitor in this case has started to type in STR. That part number match is not only what's at the beginning, it is right there in the middle of the part number, being able to find that and still pull back in a relevant match. Again, the idea here that the searcher knows exactly what they're looking for. That does not necessarily mean that they know the right part number, that they have the exact information they're going to type in, that they're going to be correct in that information. So you want to make sure that you're providing good functionality to help get them to that. Another thing that we can leverage here for kind of the searchers, again, to think about that idea of the, increasing that average order value, and that they can be open to additional suggestions, is that when they then get to that product detail page, they've typed in that search, they've gotten directly to the product they're looking for. At that point, then, this is a good opportunity to present not alternatives or not just accessories, but this concept of obviously frequently bought together. Amazon's been doing this for years. It obviously makes a lot of sense to suggest the things that we're seeing. They're buying this, well, they're buying X, Y, and Z. Let's, in addition to that, we're seeing other visitors buy those additional items. This is a really great point to drop in those kind of suggestions for that, to help make that searcher who, is just coming in to buy that product, oh yeah, I was specifically looking for this drawer, but I'm also going to need, the hamper and the rack that would go along with that drawer to really complete kind of this laundry room set that I'm looking to build out. It just makes sense at this point to help expose that information, and it can be a really good kind of easy win to help, increase that average order value by presenting this at that point to help build off of the searcher who knows exactly what they're looking for. I do want to dive a little bit deeper into that example that we talked about of kind of unit of measurement conversion, because this is a really big kind of stumbling block. And not to get too salesy here, but this is something that HawkSearch has solved very elegantly on our end. So even if you're not going, thinking about HawkSearch, something to keep in mind when thinking about how to help improve our kind of search experiences are these kind of use cases where, in this example here, we're looking at an electrical supply company who works with, very complex catalogs. They've got, part numbers and unit of measurement searches and so on and so forth. you want to make sure that you're able to support kind of all of those use cases for the searcher who's coming to the site. So in this example here, in the screenshot we're providing here, you can see that the visitor has done a search for 6 inches PVC end cap. And they spelled out the term inches, INCHES. Well, you can see within the search results, within the autocomplete that's appearing there, that we are seeing results that not only contain, or actually you can see in the results there, these results are kind of matching against all of the various ways that someone might type in inches. We've got the first result pulling back in with 6 INCH. We've got the second and third result pulling back in with double quotations, which is a common abbreviation to mean inches. So in this case here, while the visitor has typed in INCHES, we're seeing that the results are still matching kind of all of the variations of that product detail. It's not only pulling back in products that have specifically INCHES, which would obviously exclude just the first 3 results that we're already seeing. By having the ability to kind of stretch that match and have the understanding of what those different kind of unit of measurements can mean, a tool like HawkSearch can help drive those kinds of better results there, where regardless of kind of what the product data says and regardless of how the visitor is searching, they know specifically what they're looking for. The searcher, in the searcher's mind, they're saying 6 inches, I'm looking for that product. But your data might say, oh, well, we've got that as 6 double quotation, we've got that as 6 IN, we've got that as 6 INCH. That could cause a big disconnect between what each visitor is seeing, regardless of how they're putting in that search term. We want to make sure that we're streamlining that the visitor always sees the same set of results. The really cool thing that we can do, and what's kind of unique to the way that HawkSearch is solved for this, is that we can then understand kind of comparisons between unit of measurements. And actually, from a perspective of imperial versus metric, this will also help us understand the conversion between those 2 units of measurement to make sure that if someone's searching in meters versus yards versus feet, we'd be able to understand those searches as well. But in this example here, we can see that we've done a search for a 1/2 foot PVC end cap. Now, obviously, within a foot, there are 12 inches. And so if I'm looking for 1/2 of a foot, that would also mean 6 inches. And again, we can understand that and pull back in the same relevant results. And again, if you're looking at that autocomplete, making those suggestions, again, this is a great tool for your visitors, especially for the searcher. They've typed in this, they can see that they're getting back in the right results of what they're looking for. And from just a demonstration perspective here, you can see that this is actually matching against that term. We've typed in a fraction, 1/2. We've typed in foot, and the results are actually being converted to understand that that can mean 6 inches. And just in general, that fraction can be a stumbling block for a lot of search engines. And so again, we're very proud of our ability to be able to handle that. But we can also do one last example here just to kind of drive the point home that we can also do this and for other kind of unit of measurements and values here. So we've done a whole number, we've done a fraction. Now we're going to do a decimal point. So 0.5 feet. Also note that FT is contained within the same search term. There's no space there. That's also usually a very big kind of stumbling block. And again, as you look at those results, we're still continuing to match that 6 inches as the result. So really kind of powerful functionality there. And again, this idea of, from a searcher's perspective, they know exactly what they're looking for, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have the right terminology or the same terminology that you have in your environment. So anything you can do to help kind of bridge that gap, partial matching on searches, unit of measurement conversions like this, being able to do spell correction, those kinds of things can really help go a long way. But let's get into the next example. So if someone has graduated from the informational end of things and they are not going for the search box, one of the other ways that we then see them going into is a navigational approach. So this is the other kind of persona, the other side of the coin to the search experience, is that someone knows what they're looking for, but they might want to look around a little bit more. Kind of the natural evolution of that informational visitor is maybe into a more navigational state. They want a little bit more guidance. The idea that we're talking about here is usually that there is a category that someone knows of what they're looking for, but that, they might want to see kind of all of the brands that are available. Maybe they haven't made quite that decision yet, or they want to look at kind of all of the different sizes that might be available. And so they want to get to a certain spot where they can then see kind of everything. But they're not kind of starting at a point of no information. So you need to make sure that you're kind of giving them the ability to get to that. You're not typing in kind of broad questions. They're being a little bit more specific. So they're going to skip that search box and go for this kind of top level navigation, get into different categories of your site. So again, the common habits, like we were talking about here, casually browsing, using category pages. Another really good example is being able to leverage on-site recommendations. So being able to, leverage the fact that if they're graduating from like an informational visitor, this is someone who might have been on your site before, doing several searches, doing several kind of looking around, poking at different products, looking at different ideas. Well, you can use all of that information from when the visitor was previously just in that informational phase to drive some recommendations, do some personalization, leverage that AI to say, hey, we know you were on the site previously. Here is the other things that you were looking at previously. Here's the products that you were looking at last time. Here's products we think you might be interested in based off of what you have looked at in the past. Be able to leverage those signals from that informational phase into the navigational and presenting that kind of like on a homepage. Hey, welcome back. Here's some suggestions for you, or we think you might be interested in. Just kind of acknowledging the history that you have with the visitor to get them more quickly towards those kind of products that they were previously looking at. So this user is open to suggestions. You want to be able to curate options that help round out their purchases. So again, continuing to leverage those recommendations to further expand that out. Facets, filters, variations, and accessories to the products make that easy to navigate. So again, if someone lands on that category page and they're looking at a list of products, you want to make sure that they have that left-hand navigation, or that kind of can be top level, really the facets and filters, the ability to refine the search or the category page to say that I'm looking at this brand of mowers. Well, what is the what's the length of the blades on that? What's the bag capacity for that? Being able to filter against those options so they can compare their options very easily without having to go into a bunch of different product detail pages and open up a bunch of different tabs. And again, product comparison can be a good option here at this point as well, because they are going to be a little more open to suggestions. That navigational visitor hasn't necessarily made their mind up on one specific visitor or one specific product, but they're looking for some guidance on what to purchase. So tools. Well, again, we want to make sure that we're highlighting on things like that autocomplete, being able to guide a visitor if they're doing those broad searches to say, in this case, the example here that we have on the left of I'm looking for a speaker. Well, we want to make sure that you're giving them all of the options, make those suggestions for those recommended products, make the suggestions for the popular searches, but also give them those product categories so they can more quickly get directly towards what they're looking for. So even if someone is a navigational visitor is what we would kind of classify, they might still interact with the search box in the idea of this is going to be get me quicker than having to click through a bunch of different menus to navigate to a particular category. Having those categories be a part of that autocomplete can really help that navigational visitor find directly what they're looking for. Something that we don't talk about here because it's hard to show in a screenshot is that you can also leverage things like redirects from a search perspective. So in this example here, on the left-hand side, if someone was to do a keyword search for speaker and you have a dedicated speakers category page, it can be a really simple thing to say, well, when we see those search terms, those really broad, really generic kind of terms appear in our search box, let's go ahead and redirect them towards that category page so that they're not then having to dig through a bunch of navigation choices. They're not just getting back in a bunch of broad search results. Let's go ahead and redirect them towards that. Again, making suggestions for kind of fitments, as you see there on the right-hand side, that is something that we'll talk about a little bit more in depth here in just a second. We want to make sure that really digging into that idea of facets and filters. And actually, let's go ahead and get into that next slide here and show you what we're talking about here. So when we think about a navigational visitor, kind of the most extreme example of that would be this idea of someone who is, like a fitment search. When we see this a lot in the automotive space, where you might be looking for an oil filter or a spark plug or a fuel injector or something like that, but you can't just take any particular fuel injector off the rack. It needs to be specific for your vehicle. And so this idea of a navigational visitor, if you want to think about, again, kind of the extreme example of that, it would be someone like who's looking for a particular vehicle, a part for their particular vehicle. And so again, we've given you some screenshots here just to provide some context. This is an example here where someone has done a search for a filter, and we're pulling back in 25 different pages of results, and none of these are necessarily specific to the vehicle. Now, that navigational visitor, one of the things they can do is use a fitment selector to say, well, we want to be able to select what year, what make, what model, and make sure that we're driving the right results for that. Commonly, this is done through some drop-down boxes. This can also be done through search requests. We've definitely handled that in the past where visitors have put in a full search term of, in this example, to say I'm looking for a 2013 Ford F-150, we would be able to obviously parse that out. But more commonly, we see this as kind of this navigational approach where, the visitor, as opposed to going into a category, they're just as similarly making a selection from these drop-down boxes to indicate specifically what they're looking for. Now, again, keep in mind, this navigational visitor might be providing a very specific kind of criteria or fitment or filter for us, but there still are other options that we want to make available. Because again, the navigational visitor needs or is looking for multiple suggestions. They haven't entirely made up their mind So in the example here, even when we provided this very specific fitment of I'm looking for that 2015 or 2013 Ford F-150, when we now do that same kind of generic keyword search of filter, we're able to then go ahead and filter those results out, no pun intended there, we're then going down now from 25 results down to 17, and these products then are specific for that vehicle that we've indicated. So this is just an example of that navigational visitor, how they're going to flow through the site experience and how they can get to the specific process they're looking for by still having that kind of broader reach to say, we want to show multiple kind of experiences within this. And of course, at the end of the day, we want to get everyone to that transactional point where the visitor has actually converted off of that. This user wants to buy. And so there's really not a whole lot to actually say on this. Usually this is kind of the end point, like this slide is saying here. They've started off maybe as an informational and then graduated into a searcher or a navigational user. They're now ready to purchase. And so really the best thing you can do with this is to make this kind of as easy to do as possible. And so you have several opportunities, though, when they get to this point by doing those kind of cross-sells and upsells, suggesting those complementary accessories. And so you might be noticing as we're going through that there is a lot of kind of crossover on some of these strategies here. When we're thinking about an informational visitor, you want to make suggestions for alternative products. When we're thinking about a searcher, they're landing on that product detail page. You can start to suggest those those accessories that go along with it. These are very common kind of things that all feed back into this transactional goal, where you want to then have that visitor convert into this transactional persona. And so you want to make sure you're increasing those average order values by adding in those cross-sell opportunities, those upsell opportunities. And it's not just about that, although obviously that is the end goal there, is that for all of the other kind of personas that we've talked about, they have additional benefits for them. If I am an informational visitor, that alternatives would be important for me to see. The accessories might be important for me to see to understand kind of what I might be needing to buy in full. But that also then comes into play for this transactional visitor. When they are coming back in to buy, they have all that information on hand. They know they can leverage the same kind of tools that we're seeing on the site there to complete that. So some things you can also do here is to set up reordering paths depending on what kind of industry you're in. We see this a lot in the B2B space where someone comes back in, they're very commonly kind of just always reordering the same set of products. You can definitely enable that to help improve that kind of ease of use and kind of smooth the transaction process out for those visitors. So Ken, what tools can help that visitor? So we were just talking about this a little bit more, but let's give you some visual representation of that. Add more items to your cart. Again, this is a really common kind of approach to say when someone is in that checkout process that you want to make those suggestions for, well, what have other customers bought? What other customers looked at when buying this product? Leverage that machine learning, leverage that AI to help improve those kind of recommendations there and to help increase that average order value by making those suggestions. You'll see a similar kind of concept, more of a kind of going back to that bottles example that we showed before, leverage those accessories and the similar items to help that visitor who, if they're going to purchase that product, maybe that product is currently out of stock. Well, now here are the suggestions for similar ones for that. Or if I'm going to purchase that product, here are the accessories that would go along with that. Then, of course, like we also talked about, the ability to also add previous orders, just repeat those orders over and over again. Make that as quickly, make that as easy as possible for the visitor coming back to the site. One other thing to keep in mind is that there obviously is the idea of abandoned carts. This might be a transactional visitor who started that process, got distracted, maybe they didn't have their wallet with them, maybe the boss called or something like that. The kids were in the other room, and so you can go ahead and leverage tools like this to re-engage those visitors who might have left the site with a shopping cart. Obviously, you can always provide those kind of discounts, as you see here, where this is also incentivizing the visitor to return by offering an additional discount on top of that. Another tool to think about as a way to help improve that transactional visitors kind of experience on the site and get them back into the use case there. So we've kind of covered those kind of four kind of personas there, but there is one last kind of thing that we're going to talk about. We did mention that this was 5 ways to engineer engagement with your catalog, and obviously the 4 kind of personas are kind of the leading way to think about that, as these are ways that you can really kind of think about how are visitors interacting with my site. The 5th way that we talk about, though, is actually understanding, is this having any kind of impact? And this is going to be covering reporting and analytics. So in this regard here, what you're really going to be able to look out for, and what we want to make sure that you're taking away from this conversation here, is when you think about all those previous segments that we were just covering, the analytics and reporting can help you understand, is that actually having an impact? They'll be able to tell you if you're meeting the needs of your different user segments and guide you on how to improve upon that delivery. So be able to look at that kind of information and make actionable decisions. And so what do we mean by that? The different opportunities that you can leverage here. So if we were thinking before about the different brand opportunities when it came to an informational visitor, well, what are the opportunities when it comes to a reporting functionality? And this can be to test different strategies. Obviously, A/B testing is a huge benefit when it comes to understanding, are the changes that I'm making to focus on that informational visitor? Is the fact that I've added suggestions for alternatives using recommendations to a product detail page, is that having an effect versus the pages where we're not making those suggestions? I can help you understand the data as well, those spell corrections that we're talking about, those partial matches for searches, being able to understand, are there different synonyms that maybe we need to set up? Is that unit of measurement conversion working the way that we would like it to? Is this capturing all of the visitors that are searching on that various different ways? And then, of course, regular reporting. And what we mean by this is that you want to be able to do this kind of repeatedly. This should be something that it's not just a once-off, oh, I looked at this report, everything looked good. The best thing that you can do for reporting analytics is to make that a regular part of your strategy of reviewing this, once a week, once every 2 weeks, some kind of regular time frame where you can start to understand what that experiences are starting to track out. What is that trend starting to look like? We do want to give some insights into different reports that might be important to look at, reports that are going to help drive some of the experiences that we're talking about and help give you those insights into, is this working the way that we wanted to? Now, you might recall earlier I mentioned that, for that navigational visitor who is going to go up that search box still and put in a very broad kind of category-based search, that's a great example for a report like redirect tracking. Are we seeing those search terms coming in? Are they being redirected? How often are we seeing those search terms? Is there, redirects that are happening that are going to pages that are no longer relevant? We see this kind of happen a lot in our B2C environments where clients might set up, a redirect for Black Friday. During that time frame, someone might come to your site, might search on Black Friday. You're going to have a nice redirect that takes them to your curated page of all your Black Friday sales. But now it's the middle of June and someone comes to the site and randomly types for Black Friday. That no longer has any kind of relevance. So using redirect tracking reports to highlight, how often are those happening? What are those terms? Are they going towards relevant information? Can help keep you on top of those use cases so that you're fully supporting those navigational visitors. Another good thing to look at is searches without clicks. These can be a great kind of report that will help you understand not just those use cases where searches, came back in with no results. So kind of the null results report is a very common kind of base thing. And that is something also that we have on the screen here. We refer to it as a searches with poor results experience, but the searches without clicks is kind of the next step on that. This is searches that came back in that did actually have, results are returned. I did this search, I got back in maybe 100 products, but then I didn't do anything with it. I didn't make any selections. I didn't navigate to any products. I didn't use any facets or filters. I just left the site. This is a good example for those. This can help you kind of drill in on those use cases for both like kind of the informational visitors and also the searches that are coming, the searching personas that are coming to the site. Informational visitors are going to want to make sure that they're seeing kind of the right information for that product. Is there documentation that's visible? Does that product comparison functionality available? For the searchers themselves, are you seeing searches for direct product numbers and people are not making those selections? Are we seeing partial matching? Are we seeing spell corrections? Those can be those use cases where a searches without clicks kind of report can help give you those insights into really easy kind of things to fix, because it can be those use cases. Someone has come to the site, they are doing those searches, they're telling you what they're looking for, and they're getting back in results. So it's not an issue of you're not carrying the products they're looking for. It's an issue with what are they getting out of those results. Again, going back to the navigational, we do have something, a very common report that you'll see across a number of different tools is something like the top 250 facets. This will give you insights into those facets and filters that your visitors are navigating to, that are using to filter through your search results. This can be very important to understand, well, what are the important criteria that my navigational visitors are looking for? This also usually then correlates very well towards what the informational visitors are looking for. It's going to be common things that informational visitor, once they've then graduated to the navigational visitor, are going to be using those selections to make those refinements and kind of further get that guidance towards the product they're looking for. We touched on searches with poor results a little bit, but this is really just the idea of being able to see those searches with zero results. We approach it in a slightly different fashion where it's not only searches with zero results. We also want to show you those use cases where visitors have done searches and they got back in only 5 results or only 10 results, because that can still be a problem. That can highlight use cases where someone has done a search and it matched off of something in the long description, but it wasn't really what the product wasn't really the product the visitor was looking for. So just some things to keep in mind there. The last few I'll kind of highlight over. I know we want to make sure that we're leaving some time for questions. And as a reminder, please do submit any questions into the chat there. We will be getting towards a questions and answer session here momentarily. So please submit any questions. We already see that we've got a few in the chat there. So looking forward to tackling those. But again, please do submit those questions as we wrap up the presentation here. The last few reports to highlight, though, before we get into talking about that, is going to be things like spelling suggestions. We talked a lot about that through several different use cases. That'll help your informational, your navigational, your searches, obviously. These kind of reports can help you understand, well, what are the spelling suggestions that are being caught automatically? What are the spelling suggestions that were not being caught automatically that we might need to set up a rule for? Conversion tracking obviously is going to be an important one as well. This is the bread and butter. This is, when we, at the end of the day, this is what we're looking for, is just to understand, are our visitors actually converting off of the search terms, the navigational choices that they're making? Where are we seeing that happen? What are those use cases, those experiences? And last, but certainly not least, is definitely tackling your top 250 search keywords. So this just gives you an idea of, for those searchers who are coming to the site, what is kind of the big picture? What are they looking at? What are they searching on? And this is one of those ones that really benefits the most from kind of taking a look at that trend analysis of looking at this time and time again to see, well, this is what it was last month. This is what it is this month. What are the terms that are the same, and what are the terms that are different? To that end, you obviously want to be able to look at things like those kind of total searches where you can see these on a trend, can see those kind of dips and those peaks and valleys, and what does that look like? Something to keep in mind when looking at really any of these different kinds of reports is looking at this not just on a one-to-one basis of, I'm looking at this report now, but what does this mean over time? When were we seeing those searches? Over what period of time? When were we seeing those clicks versus searches? What does that kind of trend graph look like? So something to definitely keep in mind when looking at those experiences within the reporting and analytics section to help drive and make sure that you're making making the right decisions as you're looking towards building out these different personas. And with that, left just a little bit over 15 minutes. I think that's pretty good for questions and answers. And Ashley, I believe anything from the chat there?
Yeah, so thank you very much for that presentation. It looks like we already have some questions coming in. Just a reminder to everyone in the audience to click on the Ask a Question widget at the bottom of your screen. And it looks like we've got several questions already. First question. How does recommendations fit in a B2B website? I'm only used to seeing recommendations in a retail site.
Yeah. So that's a good question. It's something that we actually kind of commonly run into in our environment here, because it is such a kind of critical piece to the puzzle. B2B recommendations really focus on kind of leveraging that wisdom of the content. You heard me mention that a little bit earlier, but it's really about understanding the complexity of that catalog and being able to make suggestions using that information. So we see less of the, like customers also bought or, trending products. That's less important for the B2B environments, where it's more commonly seen in B2C. And that's typically where that disconnect happens is, you look on Amazon, it's like, customers also bought this together. And it doesn't have the same kind of relationship in a B2B environment. In the B2B environment, it's going to be that examples like we were talking about with those bottles and those caps. That is a really specifically kind of, example of using the actual product detail information to make suggestions for relevant products that will make sure that you're making that suggestion. It is the exact right product for the exact right. The accessory is the exact right accessory for that product, I should say.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question. How can we utilize Google tools to enhance the search experience?
That gets into a lot of the SEO functionality of kind of how you're looking at the getting visitors to the search. So where are they ending up at? There's a lot of different ways to tackle that. From our end here, kind of from this presentation, we're a little bit more focused on kind of once you've gotten off of the Google experience and into your site search. So that would be something that I think we can maybe tackle on a follow-up, because we do have obviously other tools and ways that we can help from the Google tools experience, but this was more kind of focused on the site search experience. But I appreciate the question.
Okay. Second question. Sorry. For a smaller company with less resources, what would you recommend as a top suggestion to improve an e-commerce store, especially if you don't have a huge IT team to support this?
Yeah. So from that kind of end, I would say it's the biggest win that we can see, and really is just kind of looking at. This seems a little self-centered here, but it really is. Search can be such a big differentiator. It is something that not a lot of people pay attention to. It is, the e-commerce platform we're on has search built into it, and so we've got that search thing taken care of. We don't need to worry about it. But as you've kind of hopefully seen through this experience here, this is something that can be a pretty easy, pretty low effort implementation. We have several different ways to get results back onto the sites from a search perspective, but it really can help give you a lot of different tools to help improve those experiences. If you're using just kind of the search that came out of the box with whatever platform are you on, things like partial searches. If I misspelled a search, am I putting in a part number incorrectly? Long tail searches. Those are things that are going to break that experience and lead towards a poor experience. Whereas your competitors, if they're putting in that effort into improving that search experience, it can touch on so much of the different functionality of the site that can improve all of these different kind of personas that we're talking about.
Next question. Are these recommendations fit for luxury brands? Since they are not meant to be pushy in sales, how do you balance sales and brand image in this case?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. The way that actually works is the recommendations themselves, you have the ability to kind of frame out how is that going to be presented to the visitor. So if you think back to some of the different slides and different screenshots that we're showing you, the wording on that, here are the accessories, or you may also like, or customers also bought. Those are more the kind of generic things that businesses commonly use. But that language that appears when a recommendation is being presented, you have the ability to change that to what your business wants to say. So for like a luxury brand where it's meant to be not very pushy, and you're really just kind of trying to present alternatives in a more gentle kind of fashion, it all comes down to kind of how would you phrase that language there. Instead of it being customers also bought, it could be we may we suggest, or something to consider, more changing the language around that presentation so it has that softer, less pushy approach to it. But while still delivering the same kind of functionality, so that as a business you're still able to leverage that. Oh, hey, this wasn't a pushy sales approach, but this is I was looking. This does go along with this. This is it fills that kind of salesperson role without having to have that kind of pushy language on top of it. So it really comes down to the framing of that, and that's obviously fully supported in our tool.
Okay. How do the personas evolve or change over time? Would you ever take things like market trends or consumer preferences or a recession into consideration when trying to reach specific personas?
I'm sorry, could you say it one more time?
So, how do the personas evolve or change over time? Would you ever take things like market trends or consumer preferences or a recession into consideration when trying to reach specific personas?
Yes. So those are obviously all kind of factors that you want to be layering in. And that's part of that kind of going into the reporting and analytics section of the tool that or the presentation that we covered there, is be able to understand when those things are happening and what kind of impact is that having on your visitors of the site. Are they changing the way that they're searching? Are they changing the products that they're looking for? Is that impacting? Are they now becoming more price conscious due to a recession? Are we seeing a new product line launched at one of our competitors, and so now we're seeing kind of a increase in searches related to that on our site here? Using that reporting analytics can help give you that kind of information so you can identify those trends and start to react towards that, using these kind of segmentations to understand, well, what kind of visitors are then coming towards the site, and what are their goals that they're looking to accomplish. For definitely one of the things that you'd want to keep in mind there.
Okay. Is there any way to see gaps in my product? Sorry. Is there any ways to see gaps in my product offerings that users frequently search for?
Yes. So at least within the HawkSearch tool, we do have that kind of searches with poor results and searches without clicks. So we talked a little bit about that on the reporting slides there. This can help you identify those gaps where you can then see, are we returning in results and our visitors are not interacting with them? That can be a good indication that maybe you're not returning the right products that your visitors are expecting to see. as well as that kind of searches with poor results where our visitors coming to the site searching on terms for products that you don't carry. That can be a good way to identify gaps. I will also kind of throw in that unit of measurement conversion that we talked about earlier as well. That is another way to help identify some gaps. That we showed you more examples of kind of length as a value, but there's a lot of different conversions that we can also do on this end. Volume, weight, capacity, fluid ounces. Like all these different kind of unit of measurement values that can also help identify gaps and help make that so that it's less of a management of a product catalog and more of just this kind of solves that from the search end of the equation.
Okay. How can we utilize this tool to enhance search results in e-com leaders?
So I believe the question is more looking at kind of outside of the site search experience. So this is really just looking at kind of your particular on-site experience. So when visitors are arriving at your e-commerce website and not something like an Amazon, you can leverage some of the kind of ideas and kind of understanding the reporting and analytics that are happening within a site search tool. So what are visitors searching on my site, and what is important for visitors on my site, and what does that then mean from an experience on someone like an Amazon, and using that information to say, well, maybe we want to help promote something on the Amazon end. But it really is kind of two separate equations that we're looking at here. Is that we want to make sure that when someone has arrived on your specific site, what are the differentiators that we can provide, and how can we make that experience as pleasant as possible versus having everyone just go to that Amazon, because then you're competing with everyone else in the Amazon pool. Whereas if you can get them to your site, that can, I think, back to the top of the presentation there where we were talking about the SEO functionality can drive and get visitors to your site. Once they've gotten there, you want to make sure that the experience delivers and that they can find what they're looking for. And that can be a big differentiator from your competitors who might only be focusing on that kind of Amazon pool where you're competing with everyone, including Amazon themselves, which is obviously the 800-pound gorilla in the room there. If you can get them to your site and you can provide a good experience there on the site, that can be a big differentiator and help make you stand out.
Okay, and that was the last question. Thank you very much. And just a reminder to the audience, you can still send any questions while watching on demand. All unanswered questions and future questions sent will be answered at a later date. I would like to thank Jonathan for his presentation and Hawk Search by Bridgeline for sponsoring this webinar. To the attendees, you will receive an email telling you how you can access the on-demand version of this webinar, or you can access this through our website, which is www.arena-international.com. We look forward to sharing further webinars with you, so please do keep an eye on the website just mentioned. Thank you once again for attending, and we'll see you next time.